Your services are no longer required. The words hit me like a slap across the face. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might vomit right there on the polished mahogany conference table I'd personally selected 3 years ago. 15 years of my life. 15 goddamn years building this company from the ground up. And they fired me with 7 words and blank stares. I looked at each face around that table. Men I'd worked alongside for over a decade. Men whose children's birthday parties I'd attended. Men who'd called me at 2 a.m. when projects went sideways, knowing I'd fix their messes. Now they wouldn't even meet my eyes. Except Warren. CEO Warren Blackwood stared directly at me. His face a mask of corporate indifference that didn't quite hide the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. Satisfaction. The bastard was satisfied. My name is Maggie Lanier. I'm 43 years old, and until 9:17 a.m. that Tuesday morning, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Healthcare Solutions. Before I continue, if you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and subscribe to hear stories that'll make your blood boil and your heart race. We've decided to take the company in a different direction, Warren continued, his voice carrying that practiced CEO gravitas that once impressed me. Ethan will be stepping into your role, effective immediately. Ethan. Fuck Donovan. Warren's son-in-law who'd been with the company all of 7 months. The same Ethan who'd asked me last week what HIPAA stood for. The same Ethan who'd been handed a VP title the day after he married Warren's daughter, Kira. I see, was all I could manage, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. And when exactly did the board vote on this? I looked pointedly at Thomas, our CFO, who had texted me just yesterday about our afternoon coffee ritual. Thomas suddenly found his notepad fascinating. It was decided last night. Emergency session. An emergency session I wasn't informed about. A session where they voted to replace me with a 32-year-old former hedge fund brat, whose greatest achievement was being born with the right connections and marrying the right woman. HR has prepared your separation package. Warren slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Generous, I think you'll find. We're not monsters, Maggie. No, monsters would be more honest about their intentions. I didn't touch the envelope. 15 years, I said quietly. I was here when we had 17 employees working out of that converted warehouse in Somerville. I personally signed our first hospital contract. I flew to Singapore with food poisoning to save the Eastwood deal when nobody else could. The room grew uncomfortably silent. I could almost taste their collective guilt, bitter and metallic. We appreciate your contributions, Warren said mechanically. But Meridian needs fresh perspectives now. The healthcare landscape is changing. Fresh perspectives, I repeated. What he meant was his daughter wanted her husband in a corner office. What he meant was I'd grown too powerful, too essential. What he meant was I threatened him. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I'll clear out my office. No need to rush, Warren said with artificial kindness. Take the day. Security will assist you. Security? As if I might steal something. As if I hadn't given this company everything I had. Weekends, holidays, relationships that withered because I was always working. I'd missed my father's final birthday to close our Series B funding. I'd postponed freezing my eggs until it was too late because next year will be calmer. My life had become Meridian, and now they were escorting me out like a criminal. I walked back to my office, past the curious stares of my team. My team? Not anymore. News travels fast in corporate corridors, a digital telegraph of whispers and Slack messages. Already I could feel people pulling away, recalculating their allegiances. By noon, my closest allies would be sending congratulatory emails to Ethan. My office, with its view of the Charles River, I rarely had time to admire, looked suddenly foreign. The awards on the wall, the family photos, Mostly nieces and nephews, no children of my own. The emergency heels under the desk, artifacts from a life I'd been exiled from. I grabbed a cardboard box from the supply closet and began the humiliating process of packing up. 15 years reduced to a single container, the nameplate from my door, the lucky pen I'd used to sign our first $1 million contract. A framed photo of our original team, most long gone to other ventures. Most except me, loyal, dedicated Maggie. My throat tightened as I reached for the small jade plant on my windowsill. A gift from my mother when I made growing steadily, she'd said. Just like you, it had survived my neglect somehow, thriving despite minimal attention, unlike my relationships, unlike my fertility, unlike, apparently, my career. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Natalie, my executive assistant for the past 6 years, stood awkwardly in the doorway. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "They've already asked me to work for him," she said, her voice breaking. I told them I needed to think about it. "Take the job, Nat," I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. "You've got your mom's medical bills. I understand." She nodded, tears spilling. "They're saying you mishandled the Westlake acquisition. That costs are out of control. That's why she couldn't finish." The lies were starting already, rewriting history to justify their betrayal. "We both know that's bullshit," I said quietly. "Westlake is the most successful acquisition in company history. I know. Everyone knows." She hesitated. "He wants your files, your contacts, everything." Of course he did. Ethan couldn't do my job without my roadmap. "Tell him company policy requires a formal request through it." I replied, "Two could play the corporate procedure game." As Natalie left, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, not wanting to hear fake condolences from colleagues too cowardly to visit in person. But something made me pick up. "Maggie Lanier," I answered, my professional mask still instinctively in place. "Maggie, it's Josephine Vega." My breath caught. Josephine Vega? CEO of Helios Medical Networks, Meridian's fiercest competitor. The woman Warren Blackwood referred to as that barracuda in a pantsuit. The woman whose innovation had been eating into Meridian's market share for the past 2 years. "Josephine?" I said carefully. "This is unexpected." "I'll be direct," she said, her voice crisp yet somehow warm. "I heard what happened. News travels fast. I want to meet with you today." My mind raced. Accepting a meeting with Meridian's biggest competitor on the day of my firing would violate at least 3 clauses in my employment contract. But then again, I was no longer employed. "Why?" I asked simply. "Because Meridian just made the stupidest decision in their corporate history, and I'd like to be the one who benefits from it." She paused. "The Langham 4 o'clock, the tea lounge. Come alone and we'll discuss how to turn this setback into the best thing that ever happened to you." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat down heavily in my chair, still my chair for the next hour or so, clutching my phone. Meridian had thrown me away after 15 years of sacrifice and dedication. 15 years of missed family events, failed relationships, postponed dreams, all for a company that discarded me for a man whose greatest qualification was marrying the boss's daughter. I looked at the box of my belongings, pathetically small for a life's work, then at the jade plant, still thriving despite everything. My phone buzzed with a text from security. A 20 minutes for escort." They couldn't even give me the dignity of walking out on my own. As the initial shock began to fade, something else bubbled up from deep inside. Not just anger, not just hurt. Something darker, more primal. They thought they could push me aside, erase my contributions, and I'd just disappear. Warren had always underestimated me. It was his greatest weakness. He saw me as the reliable workhorse, the loyal lieutenant who would take the abuse and ask for more. He'd never seen the steel beneath, Never understood that my accommodating nature was a choice, not a character flaw. I picked up my phone again and created a new contact entry for Josephine Vega. Then I carefully tucked the separation package into my bag without opening it. Whatever they were offering, it wouldn't be enough for what they'd taken from me. Security arrived. 2 men I'd approved the hiring of last year. They looked apologetic but firm. "We're just doing our job, Miss Lanier," the older one said softly. "I know, Paul," I replied, picking up my small box and straightening my spine. "Everyone's just doing their job." As we walked through the main workspace, conversations stopped. Keyboards fell silent. Eyes followed my final journey, some sympathetic, most cautious, a few nakedly ambitious as they calculated how my fall might create their opportunity to rise. Near the elevator, I saw Ethan standing with 2 board members already holding court. His custom suit couldn't hide his fundamental mediocrity. He nodded at me with practiced solemnity, the expression of a man playing a role he hadn't earned. I could have walked past, should have walked past with dignity. Instead, I stopped. "Congratulations, Ethan," I said, my voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Quick question before I go. Do you remember what HIPAA stands for?" His face flushed. The board members looked confused. "I'm sure Ethan knows all about compliance regulations," one offered quickly. "Of course," I smiled thinly. "I just thought since it's the foundational law governing everything our company does, he might want to share with everyone for clarity." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Health insurance portability. End." He trailed off, the last words escaping him. "An Accountability Act," I finished. 1996. I helped write our first compliance protocols. They're in the blue binder on the left shelf in your new office. You might want to read it before your call with Boston General tomorrow. They're sticklers. Without waiting for a response, I turned and continued to the elevator. A small victory, but it felt good to remind everyone what they were losing, what he could never replace. Outside, the spring air hit me like reality itself. 15 years entering this building, and now I was barred from it. My keycard already deactivated, my email already suspended. 15 years erased in 15 minutes. I sat in my car, a sensible Audi I'd purchased to project the right image of success without ostentation, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Tears came, hot and unstoppable. I cried for my lost identity, for the sacrifices that now seemed pointless, for the future I'd thought was secure. But as the tears subsided, that darker feeling returned. The voice inside that whispered, "They think this is the end of your story. Show them it's just the beginning." I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, reapplied my lipstick, and started the car. I had a meeting at 4 o'clock that might change everything. The Langham Hotel stood as an elegant rebuke to Meridian's glass and steel modernity. Old money versus new technology. I felt strangely at home among its polished wood and discreet service, perhaps because both the hotel and I had witnessed the rise of empires while maintaining our dignity. In the tea lounge, Josephine Vega sat alone at a corner table. At 55, she exuded the confidence of a woman who had never apologized for her ambition. Her silver-streaked black hair was cut in a sharp bob that framed intelligent eyes. She stood as I approached. "Maggie," she extended her hand. "Thank you for coming." Her handshake was firm but not aggressive, confident but not dominating. Everything about her communicated a woman comfortable with her power. "I was curious," I replied, taking a seat. "And frankly, I didn't have anything better to do today." She smiled at my honesty. "Let's order first, then we'll talk about how Meridian just handed me the competitive advantage I've been seeking for years." We ordered Earl Grey for her, espresso for me. I needed the sharpness. "I've followed your career," she said once the server left. 15 years building Meridian's operational infrastructure, their hospital network, their compliance systems, their client relationships. She leaned forward slightly. You are Meridian, Maggie. Not Warren. Not that board of golfing partners. You. Her words touched a wound still raw and bleeding. Apparently not, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Apparently, I'm replaceable by someone whose main qualification is marrying the boss's daughter. Warren always was a fool, Josephine said with casual disdain. But his loss is my opportunity. I want you at Helios, Maggie. Not just as an executive, as a partner. I blinked. Partner, equity, board seat, freedom to build without Warren's ego constraining you. She sipped her tea. I've been watching you solve problems at Meridian that we're still struggling with at Helios. Imagine what you could do without Warren, second-guessing every innovation. The offer was stunning in its boldness, but I'd spent 15 years developing a healthy skepticism. Why would you trust me with so much? I've been the competition. For all you know, I could be Warren's spy. Josephine laughed, a genuine sound that attracted glances from nearby tables. Warren doesn't have the imagination for that kind of play. Besides, her eyes narrowed slightly. I recognize something in you that I understand intimately. The look of a woman who's been underestimated her entire career, who's worked twice as hard to get half the credit, who's had men take her ideas in meetings and received the applause. She set down her teacup precisely, and I recognized the look of someone who's finally reached her breaking point. Her words hit me like a revelation. She was right. I had reached my breaking point. 15 years of suppressing my anger, of smiling through mansplaining, of watching my ideas become someone else's achievement. It had calcified inside me, hardening into something dangerous. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, leaning forward. Josephine's eyes gleamed. Meridian's been winning the Mayo Clinic contract renewal for 6 years running. It's up again in 3 months, worth $47 million annually now. I nodded. I'd personally led the last 2 renewal negotiations. I want it, she said simply. And you know exactly how to get it. The Mayo contract, Meridian's crown jewel. I'd built the relationship from scratch, nursing it through implementation problems, system outages, and budget challenges. I knew every stakeholder by name, knew whose kids played which sports, knew who needed technical details and who just wanted bottom lines. My non-compete, I started, is aggressive but ultimately limited, Josephine finished. I've had our legal team review the standard Meridian executive contract. They can restrict you from working with us directly for 12 months. They can prevent you from soliciting their employees, but they cannot prevent you from consulting for their clients. The loophole was elegant. Consulting for Mayo wouldn't violate my non-compete if I was careful. And if Mayo happened to switch vendors after receiving my consultant insights, still something felt off. Why partner status? That's a big offer for someone you barely know. Josephine set down her teacup. Because half of something extraordinary is better than all of something mediocre. Because I've built Helios by recognizing talent others have discarded. And because her voice hardened, I've waited 5 years to see Warren Blackwood's face when he loses Mayo. When he realizes his mistake wasn't just losing you. It was creating an enemy who knows all his weaknesses. Her vendetta against Warren clearly ran deep. I made a mental note to uncover that history later. For now, revenge aligned our interests perfectly. I'd need guaranteed autonomy, I said, already mentally drafting requirements. My own team. No interference in how I build relationships. Done. And a 2-year protection clause if the partnership doesn't work out. Reasonable. I took a deep breath. Why did they really fire me, Josephine? You have ears everywhere. What's the real story? She considered me for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. The Lindale acquisition, she said finally. Warren's planning to announce it next month. $2.7 billion deal, largest in company history. but their security protocols are a disaster. Potential HIPAA violations everywhere. You would have spotted it instantly. Demanded they fix it before closing. The Lindale Group. Of course. The rising star in prescription management systems. Flashy user interface masking fundamental security flaws. I'd warned Warren against pursuing them 6 months ago. Ethan won't see the compliance issues, I realized aloud. He'll focus on the surface numbers. Josephine nodded. Warren needed you gone before due diligence. You were the only executive who couldn't be bullied or charmed into overlooking the problems. The betrayal cut deeper, knowing they'd removed me, not despite my competence, but because of it. I wasn't just inconvenient for a nepotistic appointment. I was dangerous to their reckless ambitions. I need to think, I said finally. This isn't just a job decision. It's a complete reinvention, she finished. I understand. Take 48 hours, then call me. She slid a business card across the table. But remember, your market value is highest right now while your knowledge is fresh, and your chance for... She paused deliberately. Correction of injustice is strongest before they've secured the relationships you built. Correction of injustice. Such a civilized phrase for what I was contemplating. As I left the Langham, the spring evening felt electric with possibility. My phone buzzed with concerned messages from former colleagues, the brave ones, reaching out despite the risk. I ignored them all, driving aimlessly through Cambridge as my mind raced through scenarios. I ended up at Montrose Point, a small overlook where I'd sometimes eat lunch when the office walls closed in. The Charles River flowed below, constant and unhurried. Across the water stood the Meridian Building, its upper floors still lit. As the workday continued without me, my phone rang again. This time, a name I hadn't expected. Dr. Eileen Sawyer, Chief Medical Officer at Mayo Clinic. Maggie. Her familiar voice sounded concerned. I just heard. Are you okay? Eileen and I had developed more than a client relationship over years of collaboration. We'd shared late nights troubleshooting system integrations, traded book recommendations, celebrated when her daughter got into medical school. Still processing, I admitted. How did you hear? Warren called personally to assure me nothing would change with our service. Her tone made it clear what she thought of that conversation. Said his son-in-law would be taking over the relationship personally. And I told him we'd need to evaluate our options before committing to renewal. The steel in her voice was unmistakable. Maggie, we chose Meridian because of you. Your understanding of our needs, your transparency when things go wrong, your solutions, not excuses, approach. My heart swelled with vindication. That means a lot, Eileen. It's more than sentiment. The renewal process starts in 3 months, but we're beginning the vendor evaluation now. We'd value your insights given your unique perspective. It was as direct an invitation as she could ethically extend. I may be available for independent consulting soon, I said carefully, once I sort through my transition. Excellent. My assistant will reach out next week. She paused. For what it's worth, Maggie, their loss is someone else's gain. Remember that. After we hung up, I sat watching the Meridian Building as darkness fell and office lights winked out one by one. 15 years of my life in that glass tower. 15 years of achievement they thought they could erase. I thought of Warren's smug expression, of Ethan's unearned confidence, of the board members who couldn't meet my eyes, of everything I'd sacrificed for a company that discarded me like yesterday's coffee grounds. I made my decision. The next morning, I signed Josephine's partnership agreement. By afternoon, I had office space in Helios's Cambridge location, deliberately chosen to be visible from Warren's corner office across the river. By evening, I drafted a consultant proposal for Mayo Clinic that carefully navigated the boundaries of my non-compete. 3 days after being fired, I received a text from Natalie, my former assistant. Ethan, can't find the Westlake integration documentation. Board meeting disaster. Warren furious. I smiled. The Westlake documentation wasn't missing. It was exactly where it should be, filed under acquisition notes/Westlake/final on the shared drive. But without my institutional knowledge, without my mental map of 15 years of systems and processes, finding anything at Meridian would be like navigating a labyrinth blindfolded. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped being their atlas. 1 week later, I launched my consulting practice, carefully structured with help from Josephine's legal team. My first client, Mayo Clinic. My specific project, evaluating healthcare management systems for their upcoming contract renewal. 2 weeks in, I received another text from Natalie. They lost the Harborview Hospital account today. CFO is panicking. Harborview had been wavering for months. I'd been the one reassuring their procurement team, massaging their concerns, keeping them in the fold. Without me, the relationship had withered instantly. I wasn't directly poaching Meridian's clients. I didn't have to. The relationships had always been personal, built on trust in me, not the company logo. Without my stewardship, the accounts were naturally drifting away, seeking the same level of care they'd grown accustomed to. Meanwhile, I was building something unprecedented at Helios. Josephine had been true to her word. Complete autonomy, resources at my disposal, no second-guessing. I recruited 3 key analysts who'd been undervalued at Meridian, carefully timing their hiring to avoid non-solicitation violations. Together, we created a client management approach that married Meridian's best practices with innovations I'd proposed for years that Warren had deemed unnecessary. The results were immediate and dramatic. By month 2, we'd secured 2 mid-size hospital systems that had been on Meridian's prospect list for years, not by attacking Meridian, but by offering something better, something I'd always wanted to build, but had been constrained from creating. The Mayo evaluation process was proceeding exactly as planned. Each meeting revealed concerns about Meridian's future direction. Each analysis highlighted the risks of their new management approach. Each comparison showed Helios's innovative solutions, addressing problems Mayo didn't even realize they had. Then came the moment that crystallized everything. I was working late at my new office, the lights of Meridian visible across the river when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Maggie Lanier," I answered. "Maggie, it's Warren." My blood went cold, then hot with anger. The audacity of this man to call me after what he'd done. "Warren," I kept my voice neutral, "this is unexpected. I think we got off on the wrong foot with your transition," he said, his voice carrying that forced, jovial tone he used when trying to manipulate someone. "The board has been reassessing the situation. We may have been hasty." "Hasty," I repeated flatly. After 15 years, he cleared his throat. "The point is, there might be an opportunity to bring you back in a senior advisory capacity. The team misses your institutional knowledge." Translation? They were drowning without me. The realization brought a savage joy I didn't bother to suppress. "That's a generous offer," I said, watching Meridian's building across the water. "Unfortunately, I'm committed to other projects now." "We can be very competitive with compensation," he pressed. "Whatever you're getting, we'll beat it." I thought about the partnership agreement with Helios, the equity, the board seat, the autonomy, none of which Warren would ever truly offer. "It's not about money, Warren. It never was." "Then what do you want?" Frustration edged into his voice. "Name it." What did I want? Revenge had seemed so simple at first. Make them suffer. Make them regret discarding me. But now, building something new at Helios, I realized revenge wasn't enough. I wanted vindication. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost. "I want you to learn your lesson," I said quietly. "But I don't think you're capable of that." "Don't be childish, Maggie. This is business. Sometimes hard decisions."
Replacing me with your son-in-law wasn't a hard decision, Warren. It was an easy one. The coward's choice. And now you're facing the consequences. His tone hardened. If this is about Mayo, this is about 15 years of my life I gave to building something meaningful. Something you were willing to risk for nepotism and short-term gain. I paused, letting the truth sink in. You didn't value what you had, Warren. Someone else does. That's not vindictiveness. That's capitalism. Isn't that what you always preached? After a long silence, he spoke with cold fury. You won't get away with this. The non-compete has been meticulously honored, as your lawyers have surely confirmed. I'm not working for your competitors directly for 12 months. I'm consulting independently. I haven't solicited your employees. They've sought me out.
Everything I'm doing is perfectly legal. I allowed myself a small smile. I learned contract law from watching you manipulate it for years. This isn't over, he threatened. Actually, Warren, it was over the moment you decided I was disposable. You just didn't know it yet. I hung up, heart pounding, but spirits soaring. His call confirmed everything. They were flailing without me. The Mayo account was slipping away. The Lindale acquisition was likely revealing the compliance nightmares I'd predicted. 3 days later, Natalie sent her most revealing text yet. Lindale deal postponed indefinitely. Board emergency meeting called. Ethan being questioned about due diligence failures. The Lindale acquisition, Warren's legacy-defining deal, was collapsing under the weight of the compliance issues I would have caught immediately. Issues that Ethan, with his hedge fund background and 7 months' experience, had completely missed. That weekend, I received an email from Thomas, the CFO who couldn't meet my eyes the day they fired me. The subject line read simply, "You were right." The message contained a single attachment, board minutes showing that the emergency session where they'd voted to replace me had actually been planned 3 weeks in advance. Warren had lied about the timeline, about the reasons, about everything. Thomas had finally found his conscience. Too late to help me, but just in time to witness the implosion. The Mayo Clinic decision came down exactly as I'd orchestrated. Their evaluation committee recommended switching to Helios's platform, citing innovation, security, and relationship management as key factors. The contract, now worth $52 million annually with the expanded services I'd suggested, would transfer when the current agreement expired in 3 weeks. Josephine was ecstatic. "This is just the beginning," she said during our celebration dinner. "With you leading client relationships, we'll take every major account within 2 years." I smiled, raising my glass to corrections of injustice. She clinked her glass against mine, and to women who refused to disappear when discarded. The next morning brought news I hadn't anticipated. Meridian's stock had plunged 22% on the announcement of the Mayo loss. Analysts were questioning the company's stability, and an anonymous source had leaked to TechCrunch that the Lindale acquisition had failed due to catastrophic compliance oversights that senior management ignored. I hadn't leaked it, didn't need to. The truth has a way of surfacing when systems start to crack. By that afternoon, 3 more hospital networks had contacted me about evaluation consulting for their Meridian contracts. The avalanche had begun, not because I was actively destroying Meridian, but because I'd stopped holding it together. That evening, as I worked late again in my Helios office, I received a final text from Natalie. Warren asked for resignation. Board unanimous. Ethan also out. They're talking about bringing in crisis management team. I walked to the window and looked across the river at the Meridian building. 15 years of my life in that tower. 15 years they thought could be erased with 7 cold words. Your services are no longer required. I hadn't set out to destroy Warren or Meridian. I'd simply taken my value elsewhere, built something better, let natural consequences unfold. The truly devastating revenge wasn't stealing their clients or exposing their mistakes. It was showing them and myself that I had always been the true source of their success, that without me, the weaknesses I'd been covering for years were finally exposed to daylight. Warren had believed Meridian was his creation, his legacy. Now he understood the truth. I hadn't worked for Meridian all those years. Meridian had worked because of me. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. The Mayo Clinic contract finalized and ready for signatures. The first major victory of many to come. Not a victory built on destruction, but on creation. On finally being recognized for my true value. I signed the document, then glanced once more at the Meridian building across the river. Its light seemed dimmer somehow, its presence less imposing. "Goodbye, Warren," I whispered to the window. "Your services are no longer required." Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked despite your contributions, replaced by someone less qualified but better connected? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. What would you have done in my position? Would you have taken Josephine's offer or tried something else entirely? And how do you recover when a company you helped build suddenly decides you're dispensable? If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more raw, honest accounts of professional betrayal and sweet, well-earned justice. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you, it's about building something better from the ashes of what you lost.